The wind howled like a wounded animal across the Wyoming plains, carrying with it the bite of an early winter that had caught even the hardiest souls unprepared. Luke Tanner pulled his collar higher against his neck, urging his horse forward through the gathering darkness. The gelding's breath came in white puffs, and Luke could feel the animal's eagerness to reach the warmth of the barn. It had been a long day checking the fence lines on the northern pasture, and all Luke wanted was a hot meal in his bed. The small ranch house appeared through the gloom, its windows dark save for the faint glow of banked coals in the fireplace he'd left that morning. No smoke rose from the chimney. The fire had likely died hours ago. As he approached the barn, something made him pause. The door, which he distinctly remembered latching that morning, stood slightly ajar. In these parts, an open door could mean anything from a broken latch to rustlers, and Luke had learned long ago to trust his instincts when something felt off. He dismounted quietly, his hand moving to the Colt at his hip. The leather creaked softly as he drew the weapon, the metal cold even through his worn gloves. Moving with the careful steps of a man who'd survived 10 years on the frontier. He approached the barn door. A sound froze him in place, not the sound of horses or cattle, but something far more unexpected. A child's whimper, quickly muffled. Luke's jaw tightened. Horse thieves were one thing, but anyone who'd bring a child along on such business was either desperate or dangerous. He reached for the lantern hanging beside the door, striking a match with his free hand. The flame caught, casting dancing shadows across the barn's interior. What he saw made him lower his gun immediately. Huddled in the far corner, pressed against the rough wooden walls among the loose hay, was a woman. She clutched 3 small children against her, trying to cover them all with what appeared to be a single, threadbare blanket. The woman's dress, if it could even be called that, was little more than a torn shift that left her arms and legs exposed to the brutal cold. Her feet were bare, caked with mud and what looked like dried blood. The children weren't in much better condition. 2 girls and a boy, Luke guessed, though it was hard to tell their ages through the dirt and exhaustion marking their faces. They pressed against their mother like young animals seeking warmth, their bodies trembling with cold. For a long moment, nobody moved. The woman's eyes, wide and dark in her gaunt face, fixed on Luke's gun. She pulled the children closer, if that was even possible. Her body coiled like a spring ready to bolt. But Luke could see the truth in the way she held herself. She had nowhere left to run. "Easy now," Luke said, holstering his weapon and raising both hands slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The woman said nothing, but her grip on the children loosened slightly. The eldest child, a girl who might have been 8 or 9, peered at him from behind her mother's arm. Her eyes held a wariness that no child should possess. Luke set the lantern on a nearby barrel, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Name's Luke Tanner. This is my place." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "Looks like you folks could use some help." Still silence. The only sounds were the wind rattling the barn walls and the soft breathing of the children. The boy, perhaps 5 years old, shivered so violently that Luke could hear his teeth chattering. Without thinking further, Luke unbuttoned his heavy coat and shrugged it off. The cold hit him immediately, but he ignored it, stepping forward just enough to lay the coat on the hay a few feet from the family. "Take it," he said simply. "The boy needs it more than I do." The woman's eyes darted between Luke's face and the coat, after what seemed like an eternity. She reached out with one thin arm and pulled the garment toward them. Her movements were quick, efficient, as if she expected him to change his mind. She wrapped it around the children first, particularly the boy, before pulling a corner over her own shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so soft Luke almost missed it. The words seemed to cost her something, as if speaking might invite danger. Luke crouched down, making himself less threatening. "Listen, ma'am, it's too cold out here. I've got a fire inside, food, and proper blankets. You and the young ones need to come in before this weather gets worse." Fear flashed across her face. We can't. We'll be gone by morning. Just needed somewhere out of the wind for a few hours. You won't make it till morning. Not in this cold. Those children." Luke stopped himself, seeing how his words made her pull them closer. He tried a different approach. "I'm not asking for anything. No questions, no conditions, just offering a warm place for the night." The youngest child, a girl who couldn't have been more than 3, let out a small sob. Her lips were turning blue, and Luke could see the mother's resolve wavering as she looked down at her daughter. "Oh, Mama, I'm so cold," the little one whimpered. That seemed to break something in the woman. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and she nodded once, barely perceptible. "Just for tonight," she said, her voice stronger but still wary. "We'll be gone before dawn." Luke stood slowly, backing toward the door. "I'll go ahead. Get the fire going strong. Take your time." He grabbed the lantern and headed for the house, not looking back. He could hear them following after a moment, the shuffling of bare feet on packed earth, the rustle of the coat, the soft murmur of the mother encouraging her children. The house wasn't much, just 3 rooms built solid against the Wyoming weather. Luke moved quickly, stirring the coals and adding wood until flames licked hungrily at the dry timber. He lit 2 more lamps, filling the main room with warm light, then grabbed every blanket he owned from the bedroom. By the time the family reached the door, Luke had water heating on the stove and was pulling down his small store of food: salt pork, beans, a few precious potatoes, and half a loaf of bread from yesterday's baking. They stood in the doorway like wild things at the edge of firelight, ready to flee at the slightest threat. The woman's face was all sharp angles and hollow shadows in the lamplight, her dark hair hanging in tangled strands. Now that Luke could see her properly, he guessed she wasn't much past 25, though hardship had aged her beyond her years. "Hey, come in," Luke said, busying himself at the stove to seem less threatening. "Sit by the fire." They entered slowly, the children clinging to their mother's torn dress. She guided them to the rug before the fireplace, but remained standing herself, positioned between her children and Luke. Every line of her body spoke of protective instinct. "I'm heating water," Luke said conversationally, as if finding a half-frozen family in his barn was an everyday occurrence. "And there's food coming, nothing fancy, but it'll fill bellies." The middle child, the boy, stared at the flames with something approaching wonder. "Look, Hannah," he whispered to his older sister, "a real fire." Luke's hands stilled for a moment at the implications of those words. How long had these children been without basic shelter? He resumed his preparations, pulling down plates and cups, trying not to think about what could drive a mother and 3 young children out into the Wyoming wilderness with almost nothing. "My name is the woman started, then stopped, conflict clear on her face. "No need for names if you don't want," Luke said, not turning around. "Your business is your own." "Eliza," she said finally, as if the name itself was a gift of trust. "These are my children, Hannah, Caleb, and Rosie." Luke nodded, spooning beans into a pot. "Pleased to meet you all. Now, Eliza, there's a trunk at the foot of that chair with some clothes. They were my sister's. She's back east now. You're welcome to whatever fits." Eliza's hand went to her throat, clutching the torn fabric there. Pride warred with necessity on her face. "We couldn't—" "You could and you will," Luke said firmly but not unkindly. No child should be cold when there's remedy at hand. Sarah would tan my hide if she knew I had her things sitting useless while folks were in need. As if to emphasize his point, little Rosie sneezed, a pitiful sound that seemed to decide the matter. Eliza moved to the trunk, opening it carefully. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled out a wool dress, thick stockings, and a shawl. "There's a room through there," Luke indicated with his head while stirring the beans. "Take your time. I'll watch the children." Eliza hesitated, clearly torn between the need for proper clothing and leaving her children with a stranger. Hannah, the eldest, seemed to understand. "We'll be fine, Mama," she said quietly, though her eyes never left Luke. After another moment's hesitation, Eliza gathered the clothes and disappeared into the bedroom. Luke heard the door close softly, then the quiet sounds of someone trying to wash with the pitcher and basin he kept there. "You hungry?" Luke asked the children, keeping his voice gentle. 3 heads nodded in unison. Caleb's stomach growled audibly, and he pressed his hands against it, embarrassed. "Well, that's good, because I've made too much food for just one person." Luke pulled the pot of beans from the stove and began slicing bread. "Haven't had company in a while. Gets lonely eating by myself every night." "Are you a real cowboy?" Caleb asked suddenly, his fear momentarily forgotten in the face of childhood curiosity. "I suppose I am," Luke answered, hiding a smile. "Got cattle and horses and everything. You like horses, Caleb?" The boy nodded eagerly, then seemed to remember he should be afraid and pressed back against his sister. Hannah put her arm around him protectively, her young face stern with responsibility beyond her years. Luke set plates on the table, not pushing them to come closer. "I've got a mare who just had a foal last month. Pretty little thing, all legs and curiosity. Maybe you could meet her tomorrow if your mama says it's all right." "We won't be here tomorrow," Hannah said quickly. "Mama said we can't stay." Luke nodded, spooning out beans and setting the plates on the table. "Well then, best eat while you can. Food's no good cold." The smell of hot food finally drew the children from their spot by the fire. They approached the table cautiously, Rosie clinging to Hannah's hand while Caleb tried to appear braver than his 5 years warranted. Luke busied himself at the stove, giving them space to settle without feeling watched. When Eliza emerged from the bedroom, she looked like a different woman. Sarah's blue wool dress hung loose on her thin frame, but it was clean and whole. She'd washed her face and attempted to tame her dark hair into a simple bun. The transformation was remarkable, yet Luke could still see the haunted look in her eyes, the way she scanned the room as if mapping escape routes. "Mama, you look pretty," Rosie said, reaching for her mother with both arms. Eliza's face softened as she lifted her youngest, settling the child on her hip with practiced ease. "Thank you, sweet one." Her eyes met Luke's over her daughter's head. "And thank you for the clothes, for everything." Luke waved off her gratitude, uncomfortable with the weight of it. "Sit, eat. The coffee's fresh, if you'd like some." They arranged themselves at the table, Eliza positioning herself where she could see both the front door and the window. She served her children first, small portions that suggested she was used to stretching meals. Only after they began eating did she take a few spoonfuls for herself. "This is good, Mr. Luke," Caleb said around a mouthful of beans, then caught his mother's warning look and swallowed before continuing. "Better than—" He stopped abruptly, glancing at Eliza with something like fear. "A better than trail food, I expect," Luke said easily, pretending not to notice the boy's slip. "Everything tastes better with a roof overhead and a fire nearby." The meal continued in relative quiet, broken only by the scrape of spoons and the pop of wood in the fireplace. Luke noticed how the children kept looking to their mother for permission, to take more bread, to drink their water, even to shift in their chairs. It spoke of harsh discipline learned somewhere else, and recently, when the plates were empty, Luke cleared them away despite Eliza's protests. "Your guests," he said firmly. "Besides, I know where everything goes." He heated more water and set about washing up, his back to the family. Behind him, he could hear Eliza speaking softly to her children, checking Rosie's forehead for fever, examining a scrape on Caleb's knee. The domestic sounds were foreign in his usually silent house, but not unwelcome. "Mr. Tanner," Eliza's voice was carefully neutral. "We're grateful for your kindness, but I need you to understand we can't stay past tonight. It wouldn't be safe." Luke dried his hands slowly, choosing his words. "I'm not looking to pry into your business, ma'am, but the weather's turning bad. Radio Springs is 20 miles east, Willow Creek 15 miles west. That's a hard journey in good weather, impossible in what's coming." As if to underscore his point, the wind gusted hard enough to rattle the windows. Eliza's jaw tightened, and she pulled Rosie closer. "We've managed before," she said quietly. "I don't doubt it." Luke turned to face her. "But managing and surviving aren't the same thing. Those children need rest, proper food, warm beds. You do too." "You don't understand," Eliza began, then stopped, pressing her lips together. Luke pulled out a chair and sat across from her, keeping the table between them. "Maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I know what I see. A mother protecting her children, looking over her shoulder, ready to run at shadows. Someone's after you." Eliza's face went pale, but she didn't deny it. Hannah reached for her mother's hand, the gesture both comforting and seeking comfort. "I'm not asking who or why," Luke continued. "That's your business. But I am saying this. My land runs 3 miles in every direction. I know every approach, every sound that belongs and doesn't belong. Nobody comes near this house without me knowing." "You don't know him," Eliza whispered, and for the first time real fear crept into her voice. "You don't know what he's capable of." "Maybe not, but I know what I'm capable of, and I know this land. You'll be safer here tonight than on the open trail." Eliza studied his face, searching for something, deception perhaps, or hidden motives. Luke met her gaze steadily, letting her look. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best way to earn trust was simply to be worthy of it. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would you risk trouble for strangers?" Luke considered the question. He could tell her about his sister Sarah, barely 16 when she'd fled their father's house with bruises hidden beneath her dress. He could mention the winter he'd found old Tom Garrett frozen to death not 5 miles from here, too proud to ask for help. Or he could speak of the simple code that governed life on the frontier. You helped those in need because someday you might be the one needing help. Instead, he said simply, "Because it's the right thing to do." Rosie had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, her small face peaceful in the firelight. Caleb was fighting to keep his eyes open, listing sideways against Hannah's shoulder. The older girl looked tired too, though she struggled to stay alert like a miniature sentinel. "They need beds," Luke said. "I've got a room they can use, lock on the inside of the door if that helps." Eliza's eyes widened slightly at this detail. "You'd give us a room? I'll bunk out here by the fire. Done it plenty of times when I've had ranch hands staying over." He stood, moving to the bedroom he'd indicated earlier. "Let me just clear out a few things." The room was simple but clean. A bed with a thick straw mattress, a washstand, a small window overlooking the barn. Luke gathered his shaving kit and a change of clothes, then turned to find Eliza in the doorway. Rosie still sleeping in her arms. "The lock," she said, touching the simple bolt. "You mentioned it on purpose. It seemed like something you'd want to know," Luke replied. She studied him again with those dark, measuring eyes. "Hannah, Caleb, come here." The children appeared, Caleb stumbling with exhaustion. Luke stepped out to let them enter, but Eliza paused beside him. "We'll be gone before dawn," she said again, but with less conviction than before. "Storm's coming," Luke observed mildly. "Might last a day or two, but that's tomorrow's worry. Tonight, you and the children are safe." Something in her face crumpled slightly at the word safe, as if she'd forgotten such a thing existed. She recovered quickly, shepherding her children into the room, but Luke had seen that moment of vulnerability. He gathered blankets from a chest and made himself a pallet near the fireplace. The wind was picking up outside, whistling through the gaps in the walls and bringing with it the scent of snow. A bad storm, by all signs. Travel would be impossible by morning. From the bedroom, he could hear Eliza settling the children, her voice soft as she answered their questions. Where were they? Was it safe? Could they really sleep in a bed tonight? Her answers were careful, reassuring without making promises she couldn't keep. Luke stoked the fire higher and settled onto his makeshift bed. He'd left his rifle propped within easy reach, not because he expected trouble tonight, but because old habits died hard. The Colt stayed on his hip, just in case. A floorboard creaked, and he looked up to see Eliza standing in the doorway, backlit by the lamp in the bedroom. "Mr. Tanner, Luke," she said, his name uncertain on her lips. "I need you to know, if trouble comes, it won't be your fault. You've been kind, and we won't forget that." "No trouble's coming tonight," Luke said with more confidence than he felt. "Get some rest. You look like you haven't slept proper in days." "Weeks," she corrected softly, then seemed surprised she'd admitted it. "The children sleep. I watch." "Not tonight. Tonight I'll watch. You sleep." She hesitated, torn between exhaustion and the hypervigilance that had kept them alive this long. Finally, she nodded and retreated into the room. Luke heard the soft scrape of the bolt sliding home. He lay back, hands behind his head, listening to the sounds of his unexpectedly full house. Soft footsteps as Eliza checked the window, the creak of the bed as they settled in. Rosie's tiny cough, whispered reassurances. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall, dancing past the windows like white ghosts. Luke watched them through half-closed eyes, his mind turning over the puzzle of Eliza and her children. Who was she running from? A husband? The children's father? Someone with enough power or rage to send a woman fleeing into the wilderness with 3 young ones and nothing but the clothes on their backs. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. From the bedroom, all had gone quiet except for the sound of breathing, the deep, even rhythm of exhausted sleep. For the first time in what must have been weeks, Eliza and her children were warm, fed, and safe behind a locked door. Luke pulled his blanket higher and settled in for a long watch. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, questions to navigate, decisions to make, possibly danger to face. But tonight, there was peace in his small house, and that was enough. The wind howled louder, and snow began to accumulate on the windowsills. Whatever morning brought, one thing was certain: nobody would be traveling in this weather. The storm would buy them time, though for what, Luke wasn't yet sure. He thought of Eliza's words. You don't know him. You don't know what he's capable of. Maybe not, Luke thought, his hand resting on the butt of his Colt. But whoever he was, he'd have to get through a Wyoming blizzard and one very stubborn cowboy to reach them. and Luke Tanner hadn't survived 10 years on the frontier by being easy to get through. The storm had settled into a steady howl by the time Luke heard the horse. He'd been splitting wood on the covered porch, watching the snow pile up against the fence posts, when the sound of hoofbeats cut through the wind. A single rider moving slow and deliberate through the white curtain of snow. Luke set the axe aside carefully, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle propped against the porch rail. The rider emerged from the swirling snow like a specter, tall in the saddle, wearing a long black coat that flapped in the wind. He stopped at the gate, making no move to dismount. "A hell of a storm to be riding in," Luke called out, friendly enough but not inviting. The stranger touched his hat brim. "That it is. Name's Wade Morrison. I'm looking for someone, a woman traveling with 3 children. Heard they might have passed this way." Luke kept his expression neutral, though every nerve had gone alert. "Haven't seen anyone like that. This storm's had the roads empty for 2 days now." Morrison leaned forward in his saddle, eyes sharp beneath his hat brim. He was a handsome man in a cold way, with pale eyes and a well-trimmed beard. Everything about him spoke of money and authority, from his tooled leather boots to the pearl-handled pistol at his hip. "You sure about that, friend? They might have come through before the storm hit. Woman about 25, dark hair, 3 young ones with her?" "Like I said, haven't seen anyone matching that description." Luke crossed his arms, the gesture casual but positioning him closer to the rifle. "What's your interest, if you don't mind my asking?" Morrison's smile was thin as winter ice. "The woman's my wife. Took the children and left without word. I'm worried sick about them, out in this weather. Just want to bring them home safe." The lie was smooth, practiced. But Luke had seen Eliza's fear, the way she startled at every sound. No woman fled into a Wyoming winter with 3 children unless what she was running from was worse than freezing to death. "Well, I'll keep an eye out," Luke said. "Where should I send word if I see them?" "I'm staying in Radio Springs, Sherman House." Morrison's pale eyes studied Luke's face, searching for deception. "There's a reward, of course, for information leading to their safe return. I'll bear that in mind." Morrison didn't move for a long moment, his horse stamping impatiently in the snow. "You know, Mr. Tanner. Mr. Tanner, a man living alone out here might be tempted to take in strangers, especially a woman in distress. Noble impulse. But it would be a mistake. The woman's troubled. Says things that aren't true. Makes people believe she needs protecting when really, she's the one who's dangerous." Luke met his gaze steadily. "I'll remember that too. See that you do." Morrison gathered his reins. "The children need their father. Whatever she's told people, whatever lies she's spread, those are my children and I have legal right to them." He turned his horse without waiting for a response, disappearing back into the storm. Luke waited until the hoofbeats faded completely before moving. He picked up the rifle and went inside, barring the door behind him. The main room was empty, the fire burning low. The bedroom door remained closed, but Luke knew Eliza had heard everything. These walls weren't thick enough to muffle voices, especially when every maternal instinct would have her straining to hear potential danger. He added wood to the fire and put coffee on to boil, giving her time. Sure enough. A few minutes later, the door opened and Eliza emerged alone. She changed back into Sarah's blue dress, and her face was composed, but Luke could see the tremor in her hands. "He's gone," Luke said quietly. Headed back toward Radio Springs, Eliza moved to the window, peering out through the frost-covered glass. "He'll be back. He doesn't believe you." "No, I don't reckon he does." Luke poured 2 cups of coffee, setting one on the table for her. "Morrison, That his real name? She nodded, wrapping her hands around the hot cup. Wade Morrison. He owns half of Denver, or near enough. Banks, mining interests, shipping companies. What Wade Morrison wants, he gets. Except this time, a bitter smile touched her lips. This time, I had something he didn't expect. Evidence. Papers that show where some of his fortune really comes from. He's not just a businessman. Mr. Tanner. He's a... She stopped, glancing toward the bedroom where her children slept. You don't have to tell me, Luke said. No, you should know. You should know what you're risking by helping us. She took a shaky breath. He deals in human misery, brings in Chinese workers, promises them good jobs, then keeps them in conditions that... And the girls. Some barely older than Hannah. Her voice broke. Luke's jaw tightened. He'd heard rumors of such operations, modern-day slavery dressed up in contracts and legal language. You have proof of this? I found the ledgers, names, dates, amounts paid to bribe officials, everything. He'd been drinking, left his study unlocked. I knew it was my chance, maybe my only chance. She met his eyes. I couldn't let my children grow up in that house, knowing what their father was, what he'd expect them to become. Where are the papers now? Eliza hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Hidden, safe. He knows I have them, knows I could destroy him. That's why he can't just let us go. Luke digested this information, understanding now the full weight of what had walked into his home. This wasn't just a domestic dispute or even a custody fight. This was about power, money, and secrets that could bring down an empire. He said the children need their father. Luke observed, he needs heirs, sons to carry on his business, daughters to marry off for alliances. Eliza's voice turned fierce. He's never been a father to them. Hannah learned to be quiet because he couldn't stand children's noise. Caleb still flinches when doors slam. And Rosie, she doesn't even know him. I've kept her away as much as possible. From the bedroom came the sound of movement. Hannah appeared in the doorway, her young face grave. Mama, was that... Come here, sweet girl. Eliza held out her arms and Hannah ran to her. Yes, that was him, but Mr. Tanner sent him away. He'll come back, Hannah said with certainty beyond her years. He always comes back. Luke crouched down to Hannah's level. Maybe so, but this is my land, and I decide who's welcome here. He's not. Hannah studied him with eyes too knowing for a child. He has men, lots of men who do what he says. I'm sure he does, but they'd have to find you first, and this storm's going to make that mighty difficult. Luke straightened. Besides, I've got a few friends myself. Good men who don't take kindly to folks who threaten women and children. This wasn't entirely true. Luke kept to himself mostly, had few close friends. But there were neighbors who'd ride to help if asked. And the sheriff in Radio Springs was a decent man who upheld the law regardless of wealth or influence. We should leave, Eliza said suddenly. Now, before he comes back. We've brought you enough trouble. Luke looked pointedly at the window, where snow was falling so thick they could barely see the barn. You wouldn't make it a mile in this, and even if you could, he knows you're in the area now. He'll have men watching the roads once this clears. Then we're trapped, Eliza whispered. No, you're safe. There's a difference. Luke moved to his desk, pulling out paper and pencil. I'm going to write some letters. When this storm breaks, I'll ride to town, send some telegrams. You said you have evidence. There are people who'd be very interested in that. Federal marshals, for one. Maybe some newspaper men who aren't in Morrison's pocket. Hope flickered in Eliza's eyes, quickly dampened by fear. He owns judges, lawmen. Anyone who's tried to stand against him has ended up ruined or dead. Maybe in Denver, but this is Wyoming territory, ma'am. We do things different here. Caleb and Rosie emerged from the bedroom, drawn by voices. Rosie climbed into her mother's lap while Caleb pressed against Hannah's side. They looked like a painting, Luke thought. A family portrait rendered in shadow and firelight. Are we staying here? Caleb asked hopefully. I like it here. It's warm and Mr. Luke has horses. For now, Eliza said carefully, until the storm passes. Luke spent the rest of the morning writing letters, documenting what Eliza had told him in careful legal language. She helped, providing names and dates, her memory surprisingly precise. The children played quietly nearby, building towers with kindling wood and drawing pictures in the frost on the windows. As the day wore on, Luke found himself watching them, these unexpected guests who'd transformed his quiet house. Hannah helping her mother with lunch preparations, so serious and careful. Caleb asking endless questions about ranching, his fear gradually replaced by curiosity. Little Rosie singing softly to a corn-husk doll she'd found in Sarah's old trunk. He thought of Morrison's cold eyes, his casual claim to these children. Legal right, he'd said, as if a piece of paper could override the bruises Luke suspected hid beneath their clothes, the fear that made them start at sudden movements. That evening, as they sat down to another simple meal, Luke made a decision. When this storm clears, he said, we're going to do this proper, legal-like. I know a lawyer in Cheyenne, honest man who can't be bought. We'll get those papers of yours to the right people. Make sure Morrison can't touch you or the children again. And until then, Eliza asked, until then, you stay here, all of you, as long as it takes. Hannah and Caleb exchanged glances, hope and disbelief warring on their faces. Rosie, understanding only that the adults seemed less worried, clapped her hands. You don't know what you're offering, Eliza said. He won't give up. He'll come with more men, make threats, try to destroy you like he has others. Luke met her gaze squarely. Ma'am, I've faced down claim jumpers, cattle rustlers, and men who'd kill for the coins in my pocket. I've survived droughts, blizzards, and stampedes. Wade Morrison may own half of Denver, but out here, he's just another man who thinks money makes him untouchable. He's about to learn different. The wind howled louder, as if in agreement. Somewhere out in that storm. Morrison was likely planning his next move, but here, in the warmth of the small ranch house, a different plan was taking shape. One that might just give a brave woman and 3 innocent children the freedom they deserved. Luke raised his coffee cup. To weathering storms, he said, all kinds. Eliza lifted her own cup, and for the first time since he'd found them in his barn, she smiled. It was small and tentative, but real. To unexpected sanctuary, she replied. The children, not understanding but sensing the importance of the moment, raised their glasses of milk, and in that simple gesture, Luke saw the beginning of something he hadn't expected. Not just sanctuary, but possibility. The possibility that his too quiet house might become something more. That these strangers might become something more. But first, they had to survive Wade Morrison and whatever storm he brought with him. Dawn came pale and cold, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Luke woke to find the fire burned low and frost creeping across the windows. He dozed fitfully in his chair, starting at every sound. But the night had passed without incident. He was adding wood to the fire when he heard movement from the bedroom. The door opened quietly, and Eliza emerged, already dressed. She moved with the careful silence of someone used to not disturbing others. but Luke could see the tension in her shoulders. "Children still sleeping?" he asked softly. She nodded, moving to the window. "I need to go." Luke had expected this. The clear morning would have brought back her fear, the need to keep moving that had driven her this far. "Coffee first," he said, filling the pot. "Then we'll talk." While the coffee heated, Luke watched her pace the small room like a caged animal. She'd braided her hair tightly, and he noticed she'd changed back into her original dress, the torn one she'd arrived in. "Why?" he asked. She understood immediately. "Your sister's clothes should stay here, where they belong." Sarah would disagree, strongly. Luke poured 2 cups, setting one firmly in her hands. "Now, you want to tell me why you're planning to drag those children across frozen ground with no proper supplies or destination? It's better than bringing destruction to your door." Eliza stared into her coffee. "You've been kind, Mr. Tanner. Kinder than we had any right to expect. I won't repay that by letting Wade destroy your life." Luke leaned against the table. "Where would you go?" "West, maybe California, somewhere big enough to disappear. With what money, what food, what protection against the next storm or wolves or men worse than Morrison who prey on desperate women?" Her silence was answer enough. "Eliza, may I call you that?" When she nodded, he continued, "Eliza, running isn't a plan, it's just postponing the inevitable. You need allies, legal help, a safe place to make your stand. You have all that here." "For how long? Until Wade comes back with a dozen men? Until he burns your barn, kills your cattle, makes it impossible for you to live here?" Her voice rose slightly. Then she caught herself, glancing toward the bedroom. "I've seen what he does to people who help me. Who else has helped you?" She set down her cup with shaking hands. "My cousin in Denver. She let us stay one night. Wade had her arrested on false charges, theft from his company. She's in prison now. Her husband lost his job, their children sent to his relatives back east." She met Luke's eyes. "That's what happens to people who help me." Luke absorbed this, understanding better the weight of fear she carried. "This cousin, what's her name?" "Margaret Sawyer." He made a mental note, another name for his letters, another injustice to document. "And she's the only one who tried to help?" "The only one who got the chance. After that, I knew better than to involve anyone else." From the bedroom came the sound of children stirring. Eliza moved toward the door, but Luke's voice stopped her. "What about involving them?" He nodded toward the bedroom. "What happens to those children if you keep running? How long before Rosie gets sick from exposure? Before Caleb's feet freeze? Before Hannah stops being a child altogether because she's too busy being your lookout?" Eliza flinched at each point, but Luke pressed on, gentle but relentless. "You're a good mother. Anyone can see that. But being a good mother sometimes means accepting help, even when it scares you." The bedroom door opened, and Caleb appeared, rubbing his eyes. "Mama, are we leaving?" The boy's voice held resignation too old for his years. How many mornings had he woken to find they were moving on? How many times had he left behind the promise of warmth and safety? I don't know," Eliza admitted, the words seeming to surprise her. Hannah emerged next, Rosie in her arms. The older girl took in the scene quickly, her mother in the old dress, Luke by the table, the tension in the air. "He found us, didn't he?" she said flatly. "He always finds us." "He came by yesterday," Luke said, addressing the child directly. "But he left, and he won't be taking you anywhere." "That's what Mr. Henley said," Hannah replied. "Before Papa had him arrested for stealing horses he never stole." Luke filed away another name. "I'm not Mr. Henley, and this isn't Denver." He moved to the stove, pulling down the skillet. Now, who wants breakfast can't make good decisions on an empty stomach. The simple domesticity of the moment seemed to break something in Eliza's resolve. She sank into a chair, Rosie climbing into her lap. "Just breakfast," she said quietly. "Then we'll go." Luke nodded, cracking eggs into the skillet. He'd take what ground he could get. As he cooked, he kept up a steady stream of talk about the ranch, the horses, the fence that needed mending once the snow cleared. Normal things. Safe things. The children listened with hungry attention, starved for ordinary conversation about ordinary life. After they'd eaten, Luke stood. "Caleb, you wanted to see the horses? Might be a good time while the sun's out." The boy's eyes lit up. "Really? If your mother says it's all right." Eliza hesitated, clearly torn between her plan to leave and her son's eager face. "I suppose a few minutes wouldn't hurt." They bundled up, Luke lending his spare coat to Hannah and wrapping Caleb in a blanket. The snow was knee-deep in places, but Luke broke a path to the barn, Caleb trudging determinedly in his footsteps while Eliza carried Rosie. The barn was warmer than outside, filled with the comforting smell of hay and horses. Luke's 3 mares turned to watch the visitors, ears pricked with interest. But it was the foal that captured the children's attention. A bay filly with a white star on her forehead. "Hey, she's beautiful," Hannah breathed, her careful adult manner slipping for a moment. "What's her name?" Caleb asked, stretching his hand toward the foal. "Hasn't got one yet," Luke said. "Maybe you could help me think of one." While the children were distracted with the horses, Luke moved closer to Eliza. "There's something I want to show you." He led her to the back of the barn, where a small room served as a tack storage. Moving aside some old saddle blankets, he revealed a trap door in the floor. "Root cellar," he explained, lifting the door to show a ladder leading down. But more than that, previous owner was paranoid about Indian raids. Goes down 8 feet, then tunnels out to come up behind those rocks near the tree line. Kept it stocked and ready, just in case. Eliza stared at the hidden entrance. "You're showing me this why? Because if Morrison comes back with men, you and the children go down here. Bar it from inside. There's provisions for a week. Water, blankets. The tunnel's shored up proper. Comes out where you can see the house but stay hidden. If things go bad, you take the children and run. There's a marker 3 miles north. Old lightning-struck pine. Below it's a cache, food, money, map to my friend's place in Laramie. Mr. Tanner. Luke, and I'm not planning on things going bad. But I learned long time ago to prepare for trouble before it arrives." He closed the trapdoor, covering it again. "Now you know. Makes leaving a bit less urgent, doesn't it?" She studied him in the dim light. "Why are you doing this?" Luke thought of several answers, about right and wrong, about protecting the innocent, about the code of the frontier. But what came out was simpler. "Because I've got the room. Because those children deserve better than running. Because you remind me of someone." "Your sister?" "Sarah. Yes. She was about Hannah's age when our father started using his fists instead of words. Took me too long to see it, longer still to do something about it. By the time I got her out, got her somewhere safe," he shrugged. "Can't change the past, but I can recognize the same look in your eyes that she had. The same way Hannah watches everything, protects the younger ones. What happened to her, Sarah?" "Married a shopkeeper in Boston. Has 3 children of her own now. Writes me letters about proper society and how I should come east. Find a civilized wife." A small smile touched his lips. "Can't imagine she'd approve of my current situation." "Harboring fugitives?" "Harboring guests," Luke corrected. "Who are going to stay at least until I can get those letters posted. talk to some people. Due process. Eliza, it's what separates us from men like Morrison. From the main part of the barn came Caleb's delighted laughter as the foal nuzzled his outstretched hand. The sound seemed to decide something for Eliza. 3 days, she said. We'll stay 3 more days. If Morrison comes back with force, or if staying puts you in danger, then we'll handle it as it comes. Luke moved back toward the children. Fair enough. They spent another hour in the barn, the children naming not just the foal, Star at Rosie's insistence, but every animal on the property. Luke found himself watching Eliza as she relaxed incrementally, allowing herself these moments of normalcy. As they headed back to the house, Luke noticed fresh horse tracks near the gate. Not 1 rider, but 3, circling the property before heading back toward the main road. He said nothing, but he saw Eliza notice them too, saw the way her shoulders tensed again. Inside, while the children warmed themselves by the fire, Luke checked his rifles, loaded his pistols. He did it casually, as if it were routine maintenance. But Eliza understood. They were watching, she said quietly. Let them watch. This is my land. I know every inch of it, every approach, every defensive position. He met her eyes. I've held this place against claim jumpers and rustlers. Morrison's men don't worry me. They should. They're not common criminals. They're professionals, ex-soldiers, bounty hunters, men who kill for pay. So am I, Luke said simply. Or was. The war taught me things I wish I'd never learned. Haven't had cause to use those lessons in years, but I haven't forgotten. This revelation silenced her. She studied him with new eyes, perhaps seeing for the first time the steel beneath his quiet demeanor. That afternoon, as snow began falling again, Luke taught Caleb to whittle while Hannah helped her mother with mending. Rosie played with a set of wooden blocks Luke had carved years ago for a nephew who'd never visited. It was peaceful, domestic, almost normal. But outside, Luke knew Morrison's men were watching, waiting, planning. Let them come, he thought, testing the edge of his knife. The children's laughter filled the small house, and Eliza allowed herself a genuine smile as Caleb showed off his lopsided carving. This was worth protecting, this fragile peace, this tentative trust, this possibility of something better. Morrison could bring all the men he wanted. Luke Tanner would be ready. The riders appeared at sunset, silhouetted against the dying light like harbingers of trouble. Luke had been expecting them all day, ever since he'd noticed fresh tracks during his morning rounds. 2 men, approaching slow and deliberate, making no effort to conceal their presence. He was cleaning his rifle on the porch when they stopped at the gate, close enough to talk, far enough to make quick departure possible. Smart positioning. These weren't common thugs. Evening, gentlemen, Luke called out, not setting down the rifle. Something I can help you with? The larger of the 2, a broad-shouldered man with a scarred face, touched his hat brim. Mr. Tanner? Name's Dobson. This here's Creek. We're employed by Mr. Morrison. He figured as much. Luke continued cleaning the rifle, movement steady and practiced. Same answer as before. Haven't seen any woman or children. Dobson smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Now, Mr. Tanner, we both know that ain't entirely true. See, we've been watching. Saw smoke from your chimney's been heavier lately, like you're heating more rooms than usual. Saw you heading to the barn this morning with more than one set of footprints following. Luke looked up then, meeting Dobson's gaze directly. Man's allowed visitors on his own property. That he is. Creek spoke for the first time, his voice soft and somehow more menacing for it. Question is whether those visitors are the legal property of someone else. People aren't property, Luke said evenly. Thought we settled that question some years back. Her children belong with their father, Dobson countered. That's the law. Even when their father's a monster? The words slipped out before Luke could stop them. Something shifted in Dobson's expression. You've been listening to stories, Mr. Tanner. Women say all kinds of things when they're running off with another man. Luke's hands stilled on the rifle. Is that what Morrison told you, that she's running off with someone? Stands to reason, pretty woman. 3 children to feed. No money of her own. She'd need help. Protection. Creek leaned forward in his saddle. Course. Any man fool enough to provide that help would be interfering in a legal marriage. Helping steal another man's children. That's serious business. From inside the house came the sound of Rosie's laughter, quickly hushed. Luke saw both men's heads turn toward the sound, saw the satisfaction in their eyes. Like I said, Luke stood slowly, rifle held casual but ready. I've got visitors, old friend from back east, none of Morrison's concern. Everything's Mr. Morrison's concern when it comes to his family. Dobson reached into his coat, and Luke tensed, but the man only pulled out a folded paper. Legal warrant for the return of his wife and children. Judge signed it yesterday. Denver judge? Legal all the same. Luke didn't reach for the paper. This is Wyoming territory. Your Denver judge doesn't have jurisdiction here. Now that's where things get interesting, Creek said. See, Mr. Morrison's got friends everywhere, influential friends, the kind who can make a man's life real difficult. Your mortgage is held by First National in Radio Springs, isn't it? Luke's jaw tightened. They'd done their research. It'd be a shame if the bank suddenly called in that note. Dobson continued. Or if your cattle came down with something suspicious. Or if the sheriff got reports of rustling in these parts. Maybe found some rebranded stock on your property. Are you threatening me? Stating facts, Creek replied. Mr. Morrison's a reasonable man. All he wants is his family back. You step aside. No harm comes to you or your property. You keep interfering. He shrugged eloquently. I'll need time to think on it, Luke said finally. You've got until tomorrow noon. We'll be back then. And Mr. Tanner? Dobson's scarred face was stone. We won't be asking so polite next time. They turned their horses and rode off, not hurrying, confident in their power. Luke waited until they were out of sight before going inside, barring the door behind him. Eliza stood in the middle of the room, arms wrapped around herself. The children clustered near the bedroom door, even little Rosie sensing the danger. You heard? Luke asked. She nodded. We'll leave tonight. After the children are asleep, You'll do no such thing. Luke set the rifle in its rack, checked the load on his pistols. They're watching the roads. You'd never make it past the property line. Then what do we do? Her voice held desperation. I won't go back. I won't let him have my children. Luke moved to his desk, pulling out the letters he'd written. These need to get to town, to the territorial marshal, the newspaper, the federal authorities. But I can't leave you here alone, and I can't take you with me. I can ride, Hannah said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at the girl. Papa taught me before things got bad, I can take the letters. Absolutely not, Eliza said immediately. But Mama... No, Hannah, you're not riding alone through... Eliza stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth as she realized what she'd almost said. Through men who might shoot a child to stop those letters from being delivered. Luke studied Hannah's determined face, so like her mother's. There might be another way. Eliza, can you handle a rifle? Yes, my father taught me. Good. Luke pulled down an old map, spreading it on the table. Here's what we're going to do. Come first light, I'm going to ride out obvious-like, heading to town. Dobson and Creek will follow me. Try to stop me from sending those letters. While they're chasing me, you take the children through the tunnel. Head north to that lightning-struck pine I showed you. Below it, the cache. I remember. There's a horse hidden in the grove nearby. Gentle mare. She'll carry you and Rosie easy. Put Hannah and Caleb on Star. The foal's too young, but the children are light enough for a short ride. Head northeast to the Baxter place. Tom Baxter's a good man, has 6 sons, all handy with guns. His wife will take you in while Tom rides for the marshal. And you? Luke smiled grimly. I know this land better than they do. I'll lead them a chase, double back, meet you at Baxter's by nightfall. They'll kill you, Eliza said flatly. When they realize what you've done, they'll kill you. They'll try. She moved closer, voice dropping so the children couldn't hear. I can't have your death on my conscience, not after everything you've... My death's not on anyone's conscience but my own. Luke interrupted. I make my own choices, Eliza. This is mine. She searched his face, looking for what he couldn't say. Fear? Doubt? She must not have found it, because she nodded slowly. All right, but I'm taking one of your rifles. If they get past you, come for us. She didn't finish the threat, but her meaning was clear. They won't get past me. That night, they prepared. Luke showed Eliza the weapons, made sure she understood how to use them. He drew detailed maps, made the children memorize landmarks. Hannah helped, her quick mind grasping the urgency even if she didn't understand all the details. Mr. Luke, Caleb asked as Luke tucked them into bed. Are the bad men going to take us away? Luke sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. Not if I can help it, partner. Your mama's brave, and your sisters are smart. We're all going to work together to keep you safe. I'm brave too, Caleb insisted. I can help. I know you are, and you will help by doing exactly what your mama says tomorrow. Can you do that? The boy nodded solemnly. I'll protect Rosie. I know you will. Luke found Eliza on the porch later, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the darkness. Can't sleep. Haven't been able to for weeks. She glanced at him. You should rest tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. He leaned against the porch rail. Can I ask you something? The papers you mentioned, the evidence against Morrison, where are they? She hesitated, then reached into her dress pocket, pulling out an oilskin packet. I've carried them with me every moment. Couldn't risk hiding them anywhere he might look. Luke took the packet, feeling its weight. These need to get to the right people. If something happens tomorrow, nothing's going to happen, she said firmly, echoing his earlier confidence. You're going to lead those men away. I'm going to get the children to safety, and Morrison's going to pay for what he's done. From your lips to God's ears, Luke handed back the packet. Keep them safe. They're your insurance and your justice both. They stood in comfortable silence, watching clouds scud across the moon. Despite everything, Luke found himself oddly at peace. Tomorrow would bring violence, he had no doubt. But tonight, there was this, a woman finding her courage, children sleeping safe in his home, the possibility of justice on the horizon. Luke, Eliza said softly, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know. We were blessed to find you, to find this place, even if it was only for a few days. It won't be only for a few days, Luke said. When this is over, when Morrison's dealt with, you'll need somewhere to stay while you sort things out. The house is too quiet anyway. Could use some life in it. She turned to look at him, something unreadable in her expression. You barely know us. I know enough. I know you're a good mother. I know those children deserve a chance at a real life. I know what's right." He met her gaze. Sometimes that's all a man needs to know. Before she could respond, a coyote howled in the distance, followed by another. Luke straightened, listening. Not coyotes, signals, Morrison's men, marking positions. "Inside," he said quietly. "They're getting ready for tomorrow." As they moved toward the door, Eliza caught his arm. "Promise me something. If it comes to a choice between your life and getting those letters through, it won't come to that. You promise me." Luke covered her hand with his. "I promise to do whatever it takes to keep you and those children safe. That's all I can promise." She accepted that with a nod, and they went inside to wait for dawn. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation they all knew was coming, but tonight, they were together, safe and ready. The storm was about to break. But Luke Tanner had weathered storms before. This one, with so much at stake, he was determined to survive. The evening air hung heavy with unspoken truths as Eliza stood by the dying fire, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Luke had just returned from his final check of the perimeter, snow still clinging to his boots. The children were asleep, exhausted from the day's tensions. But Eliza couldn't rest, not with tomorrow looming, not with the weight of what she hadn't told him. "You should try to sleep," Luke said quietly, adding another log to the fire. "Dawn comes early." "Luke, I need to tell you something." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "About Wade, about why he'll never stop hunting us." He settled into the chair across from her, patient and steady as always. "You don't owe me explanations, Eliza. I do. You're risking everything, and you don't even know." She pressed her hands together to stop their trembling. "I wasn't just his wife. I was his prisoner." Luke's expression didn't change, but she saw his knuckles whiten slightly where he gripped the chair arm. "My father owed Wade money, a lot of money, bad investments, gambling debts. When he couldn't pay, Wade offered a solution. Me." Her voice was flat, emotionless, as if she were telling someone else's story. "I was 17. My father signed the papers himself, called it a business arrangement, said I should be grateful such a wealthy man wanted me." "Eliza, please let me finish." She stared into the fire, unable to meet his eyes. "At first, Wade played the gentleman, flowers, gifts, promises of a grand life. I was young enough to believe it might work, that I could learn to care for him. Then came the wedding night." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He made it clear I was property, bought and paid for. When I resisted, he corrected me, said he was teaching me my place. The bruises were always where they wouldn't show. He was careful about that." Luke's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "Hannah came along within the year. I thought maybe a child would soften him, but it only gave him another weapon. 'Behave,' he'd say, 'or the girl pays for your defiance.' And I behaved. God help me, I behaved." Her voice cracked slightly. "Then I found out what his business really was. Not just the shipping and banking everyone saw, but the other things. The young women brought in from China and Ireland, promised work as domestics, but sold to houses where men paid for their company. The workers locked in his factories, their papers held so they couldn't leave. Children. Luke. Some of them were children. The evidence you found," Luke said quietly. She nodded. "Ledgers, letters, names of officials he'd bribed, judges he owned, details of shipments, human cargo listed like cattle. I knew then that I couldn't let my children grow up in that house. Couldn't let Hannah reach the age where Wade might see her as another asset to trade. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Eliza finally looked at Luke, expecting disgust or pity. Instead, she found only steady resolve. "There's more," she continued. "Wade has a partner, someone high in the territorial government. That's why his reach extends so far, why local law won't help. In those papers, there's a name, Judge Carlton Prescott. He doesn't just take bribes. He's Wade's full partner in the trafficking operations." Luke leaned forward. "Prescott, the federal judge. You know him?" "Know of him. He's got a reputation for harsh sentences, especially against Chinese and Irish immigrants. Now I understand why." Luke stood, pacing to the window. "This changes things. If we can prove a federal judge is involved, we can destroy them both." Eliza rose, pulling the oilskin packet from her dress. "It's all here. Ship manifests, bank records, correspondence between Wade and Prescott discussing their merchandise. Enough to see them both hanged." Luke took the packet, weighing it in his hands. "This is why he can't let you go. It's not about possession or pride. You could topple his entire empire. And Prescott's. They have too much to lose." She watched him study the papers by lamplight. "I didn't just run to save my children, Luke. I ran to save dozens of others, hundreds, maybe. Every month those ships come in. Every month more souls disappear into Wade's web. The federal marshals need to see this immediately." Luke carefully rewrapped the papers. "This is bigger than some custody dispute. This is slavery by another name. Now you understand why they'll kill to stop us." Eliza moved closer to him. "Why I should have told you from the beginning. You could have turned us away. Saved yourself this trouble." Luke handed back the packet. "Would have been too late anyway. Moment I saw you in that barn, saw those children shivering, the choice was made. Most men would have chosen differently." "Maybe so." He met her eyes. "But I'm not most men, and neither are you. Most women would have stayed, accepted their lot, protected themselves instead of gathering evidence that could get them killed. I had to. For Hannah, for all of them. Someone had to bear witness." She clutched the packet to her chest. "These papers are their voices, all those souls Wade and Prescott traded like goods. I carry them with me always." Luke was quiet for a long moment. "My sister Sarah," he said finally. "I told you our father hurt her. What I didn't say was that she tried to tell people. The minister, the sheriff, our neighbors. Nobody listened. Said a father had rights over his household, that she must have provoked him. She was just a child, Eliza, a child asking for help, and everyone turned away. What happened? She ran, 12 years old, middle of winter, nothing but the clothes on her back. I found her 3 days later, half frozen in a hayloft 20 miles away." His voice roughened. "I was only 16 myself, but I knew then that sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes you have to make your own justice." "Did you?" "Took Sarah and left that night. Went to our mother's brother in Texas, told him everything. Uncle Josh was a different sort of man than our father. He paid us a visit, him and some friends. Don't know exactly what was said, but our father never came looking for us. Never hurt anyone again, from what I heard." Eliza understood what he wasn't saying. "And Sarah?" "Grew up strong, happy, free." Luke smiled slightly. "Writes me letters about women's suffrage now. Sends me pamphlets about social reform. She'd like you, I think. You're the same kind of fighter, just with different weapons. I'm not a fighter. I'm just a mother trying to protect her children. Same thing in my book. Luke moved to bank the fire for the night. Those papers, we need to make copies, and if something happens tomorrow, if they get the originals. I've tried, but my hand cramps after a few pages, and there's so much. Hannah, Luke said suddenly. You mentioned she's quick with her letters. Can she write well enough to copy documents? Eliza blinked in surprise. Yes, actually, Wade insisted all the children have tutors. Said it reflected poorly on him if they seemed ignorant in public. Then let's wake her, quietly. Between the three of us, we can copy the most important pages tonight. Hide the copies in different places, some here, some for you to carry, some for the Baxters to hold. You'd trust a child with this? I'd trust your child. She's already keeping bigger secrets than most adults could handle. They woke Hannah gently, explaining only what she needed to know. The girl accepted the task with her usual solemn determination, settling at the table with paper and ink while Luke lit more lamps. For hours they worked in silence, the scratch of pens the only sound. Hannah's young hand was steady, her concentration absolute. She copied names, dates, figures, never asking what they meant. Perhaps she already knew. Luke thought, children see more than adults realize. As the night wore on, Eliza told Luke more details about the ships that arrived at night in San Francisco, about the warehouses in Denver where human cargo was sorted like mail, about the elaborate bookkeeping that tracked every soul bought and sold, every official bribed, every law broken. There's a girl, Eliza said quietly as she copied a particularly damning letter. Ming Lee, 14 years old. In the ledger, she's listed as Oriental Domestic Premium Grade. I met her once when Wade brought me to one of his business dinners. She served the tea. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pot. Luke's pen stilled. Where is she now? I don't know. That was 6 months ago. Girls like her don't last long in Wade's houses. Eliza's voice was steady, but tears tracked down her cheeks. I memorized her face. Luke, all their faces, if these papers can save even one of them. They will. We'll make sure of it. By the time dawn began to gray the windows, they had copies of the most crucial documents. Luke hid some beneath loose floorboards, others in the barn's secret spaces. Eliza sewed a set into the lining of her coat. Hannah, exhausted but proud, was sent back to bed with whispered praise. Thank you, Eliza said as they prepared for what was to come. For believing me, for not turning away like all the others. Thank you, Luke replied, for trusting me with the truth, for being brave enough to gather this evidence, to risk everything for strangers you've never met. They're not strangers. They're someone's daughters, someone's sisters. They're what Hannah could have become if I'd stayed silent. Luke checked his weapons one final time. Outside, he could hear horses moving into position. Morrison's men, ready for the noon deadline. But now the stakes were clear. This wasn't just about one woman and 3 children anymore. This was about justice for hundreds, maybe thousands. When this is over, Luke said, when Morrison and Prescott are brought to justice, those people you're trying to save, they'll need somewhere to go, somewhere to start over. Eliza looked at him questioningly. This ranch is small, but the land's good. Could build more houses, create a place where people can heal, learn new trades, make new lives. What do you think? Despite everything, despite the danger pressing close, Eliza smiled. I think Sarah was right about you needing a purpose bigger than cattle and fences. Maybe so. Luke moved to the door, then paused. Eliza, whatever happens today, those papers get through. The truth gets told. Promise me. I promise, she said firmly, for Ming Lee, for all of them. Luke nodded and stepped out to face the morning, knowing now exactly what he was fighting for. Not just Eliza and her children, but all the souls trapped in Morrison's web of greed and cruelty. The evidence was preserved, the truth documented. Now all that remained was to survive long enough to deliver it. The night pressed heavy against the windows, thick with menace and waiting violence. Luke had sent Eliza and the children to the hidden cellar an hour ago, after spotting riders circling the property like wolves scenting prey. Now he stood alone in the darkened house, rifle in hand, listening to the sounds of horses drawing closer. They came without pretense this time. No calls for surrender, no attempts at negotiation. The first indication was the crash of breaking glass as a rock sailed through the front window. Then came the voices, rough and sure of their purpose. "Tanner, send out the woman and children and we'll let you live." Luke recognized Dobson's scarred voice. He'd brought friends. Luke counted at least 3 distinct sets of footsteps on the porch, moving silent as smoke. He positioned himself where he could cover both the front door and the broken window. "Last chance, Tanner." This voice was new, younger, eager for violence. "Mr. Morrison's patience is at an end." Luke's answer was to cock his rifle, the sound carrying clear in the cold air. "Any man who sets foot in this house dies. That's my only offer." Silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Then the front door exploded inward, kicked open with tremendous force. A figure rushed through, Creek, pistol raised. Luke's rifle spoke once, and Creek spun backward, clutching his shoulder as he fell. "He's in the corner," Creek gasped, and suddenly the night erupted in gunfire. Bullets splintered wood around Luke as he dove behind the overturned table he'd prepared as cover. He counted muzzle flashes, 3 men outside, plus the wounded Creek. Dobson was smart, keeping his men spread out, making it impossible to watch all approaches at once. Glass shattered in the bedroom. Luke fired twice toward the sound, heard a curse and scrambling retreat. They were testing him, looking for weakness. He had maybe 20 rounds for the rifle, another 12 in his Colt, against 4 men, possibly more. It wouldn't be enough if they rushed him all at once. "You're outnumbered, Tanner," Dobson called. "No shame in protecting yourself, the woman's nothing to you." Luke said nothing, saving his breath and ammunition. Through the broken window, he caught movement, a man creeping along the porch trying to flank him. Luke waited until the figure passed into view, then fired. The man screamed and tumbled off the porch. 2 down, but not dead. Luke could hear them groaning, cursing. Morrison had sent experienced men, but they'd expected a simple rancher, not someone who'd learned to fight in the war's bloodiest battles. "Rush him," someone shouted, and Luke's world contracted to violence and survival. They came from 3 directions at once. Luke dropped his rifle, now empty, and drew his Colt. The first man through the door went down with a bullet in his chest. The second dove aside, firing wildly. Splinters stung Luke's face as bullets chewed into his cover. A shadow at the bedroom door. Luke spun and fired, saw the figure jerk back. But Dobson was already through the front door, moving with surprising speed for such a large man. Luke's shot caught him in the leg, dropping him to one knee. But Dobson's return fire was accurate. Pain blazed across Luke's ribs as a bullet scored flesh. "You got you now, Tanner," Dobson snarled, raising his gun for a killing shot. The rifle blast from the kitchen doorway took everyone by surprise. Dobson pitched forward, a red stain spreading across his back. In the doorway stood Eliza, Luke's spare Winchester smoking in her hands. "I told you to stay hidden," Luke gasped, pressing his hand to his bleeding side. "And let them kill you, not while I can still fight." She worked the rifle's lever with practiced efficiency, covering the windows. "Where are the others?" Before Luke could answer, hoofbeats thundered in the yard. More riders, but whose? Luke struggled to his feet, reloading his Colt with bloody fingers. If Morrison had sent reinforcements. Luke Tanner. The voice booming from outside was familiar, authoritative. This is Sheriff Clement from Radio Springs. I'm here with 6 deputies and a federal marshal. Everyone put down your weapons. Luke nearly sagged with relief. His letters had gotten through somehow, or perhaps the Baxters had ridden for help. Either way, the cavalry had arrived. "Sheriff," Luke called back, "Morrison's men attacked the house. There's a woman and children here under my protection." "We know all about it, Luke. Marshal Jennings has papers from Denver. Wade Morrison was arrested this morning, along with Judge Prescott. We're here to make sure his men don't cause any more trouble." Through the broken window, Luke could see torches and badges, the sheriff's men surrounding the remaining attackers. Creek and the others were being hauled to their feet, hands raised in surrender. It was over. Eliza lowered the rifle, her hands beginning to shake as the reality hit her. "Arrested? Wade's been arrested?" Sheriff Clement appeared in the doorway, a grizzled man with honest eyes. Behind him stood a younger man in a federal marshal's coat. "Ma'am, I'm going to guess you're Mrs. Morrison. Marshal Jennings here has some questions for you, but first, Luke, you're bleeding." "I've had worse." Luke waved off the concern, though his side burned like fire. "Sheriff, how did you know?" "Your friend Tom Baxter rode in before dawn with quite a story. We were already mounting up when a telegram came through from Denver. Seems someone sent packages of evidence to 3 different federal offices, all arriving this morning. The Attorney General himself ordered Morrison's arrest." Luke looked at Eliza in confusion. They hadn't sent any packages yet. She gave him a small, tired smile. "I sent copies before we left Denver, to Washington, to the federal building in Cheyenne, to newspaper offices. I was afraid to tell anyone, afraid they'd be intercepted. But I had to try." "Smart woman," Marshal Jennings said, stepping forward. "Those documents started a firestorm. We've got men seizing Morrison's warehouses as we speak, freeing anyone held against their will. Judge Prescott was taken from his own courtroom in chains." "The children?" Eliza said suddenly. "My children, they're safe in the cellar," Luke assured her. "Hannah's probably keeping the young ones calm." As if summoned by her name, Hannah's voice came from beneath the floor. "Janonum, Mama, is it safe?" "Yes, sweet girl, it's safe now." The next hour passed in a blur. The cellar was opened, children extracted and fussed over. Luke's wound was bandaged, painful but not serious, the bullet having gouged flesh without hitting anything vital. The bodies were removed, the surviving attackers taken to face justice. Through it all, Eliza kept the children close, Hannah helping to keep Caleb and Rosie from seeing the worst of the damage. The federal marshal took her statement, handled the precious evidence with appropriate gravity. Papers that had cost so much to obtain, that represented so many lives destroyed and so many more that might be saved. "We'll need you to testify," Marshal Jennings explained, "in Denver, before a federal grand jury. But you'll be under protection the entire time. Morrison has friends, but not as many as he thinks. Plenty of folks are happy to see him fall." "What about the children?" Eliza asked. "They've been through so much already." "The court will appoint a guardian for them during the proceedings. Someone you trust." "That would be me," Luke interrupted. Everyone turned to look at him. "If Eliza agrees, of course, the children know me, trust me, this ranch is safe, and now everyone knows it's under federal protection." Eliza's eyes widened. "Luke, you've already done so much." "Not near enough." He met her gaze steadily. "You'll need somewhere to stay while this plays out. Somewhere the children can heal. Be children again." I've got the room. Sheriff Clement cleared his throat. It's a good solution, ma'am. Luke's respected in these parts. And after tonight, everyone will know not to cross him. Your children couldn't have a better protector. Please, Mama, Caleb piped up. I want to stay with Mr. Luke and see the horses. Even Hannah, usually so cautious, nodded agreement. It's nice here, quiet, safe. Eliza looked around the bullet-scarred room, at the man who'd bled defending them, at her children already beginning to smile again. If you're sure. Never been more sure of anything. Luke winced as he shifted, his wound protesting, though we'll need to fix the windows before winter really sets in. That broke the tension, everyone laughing at the mundane concern after such violence. Plans were made. The marshal would return in a week to escort Eliza to Denver for her testimony. The sheriff would post a man to watch the roads, just in case any of Morrison's associates had foolish ideas. As dawn broke full and golden across the snow, the lawmen departed with their prisoners. Luke stood on the porch, watching them go. Eliza beside him. The children were inside, Hannah making breakfast with determined domesticity. It's not over, Eliza said quietly. The trial, the testimony, it'll be dangerous. Maybe, but the hardest part's done. You stood up to him, gathered the evidence, got it to the right people. Rest is just paperwork and procedure. She touched his bandaged side gently. You could have died tonight for strangers. Not strangers. Not anymore. Luke covered her hand with his. Besides, I told you, this house has been too quiet too long. From inside came the sound of Rosie's laughter, Caleb's excited chatter about horses, Hannah's patient responses. The sounds of life returning to normal, or as normal as it could be after such a night. Thank you, Eliza whispered, for everything. Luke squeezed her hand. Thank you for reminding me what's worth fighting for. They stood together as the sun climbed higher, warming the frozen land. In the distance, the lawmen's group was just dots on the horizon, taking with them the threat that had loomed so large. Morrison would face justice. His victims would be freed. And here on this small ranch, a family was beginning to heal. The night's violence had passed like a terrible storm, leaving damage but also the promise of clearer skies ahead. Luke thought of his sister Sarah, safe in Boston with her own family. She'd be proud, he thought. Proud that he'd finally found a purpose beyond mere survival. Come inside, Eliza said. That wound needs checking, and breakfast is getting cold. Luke let her lead him into the warmth and noise and wonderful chaos of a house no longer empty. The fight was won, but the story, he realized, was just beginning. The morning after the violence dawned crisp and brilliant, snow glittering like scattered diamonds across the ranch. Luke stood at the stove, favoring his wounded side as he prepared breakfast. The mundane task felt almost sacred after the night's chaos. Crackling bacon, bubbling coffee, the warm scent of biscuits in the oven. You should be resting, Eliza said from the doorway. She'd already been up for hours. Luke knew, checking on the children repeatedly through the night. I can't rest when there's hungry children to feed. He gestured to the table. Sit. You've done enough watching for a lifetime. She moved into the room slowly, as if still expecting danger. The morning light revealed the exhaustion in her face, but also something else, a loosening of the perpetual tension she'd carried since arriving. I keep thinking I'll wake up, she said softly. That this is all a dream and Wade will be standing over me, demanding to know where I've hidden his papers. No dream. Luke set a cup of coffee before her. Morrison's in federal custody. Judge Prescott, too. Your evidence did that. Eliza, you saved all those people. Before she could respond, The thunder of small feet announced the children's arrival. Caleb burst in first, still in his nightshirt but wide awake. "Mr. Luke, can we see the horses today? You promised." "After breakfast and chores," Luke said, ruffling the boy's hair. "Horses need feeding first." Hannah appeared with Rosie, both girls dressed in hair neatly braided. The older girl had taken on the role of little mother naturally, but Luke noticed how her shoulders had relaxed, how she allowed herself a small smile at her brother's enthusiasm. They gathered around the table, and for a moment, Luke was struck by the scene's ordinariness. Anyone looking in would see a simple family at breakfast, not survivors of an attempted murder, not witnesses to federal crimes, not refugees from wealth built on human misery. "Hey, these biscuits are good," Rosie announced, jam smeared across her cherubic face. "Mr. Luke makes the best biscuits in Wyoming," Caleb agreed solemnly, as if he'd sampled them all. "Just following my mother's recipe," Luke said, but he felt warm at their approval. After breakfast, he took the children to the barn while Eliza cleaned up, or tried to. Luke suspected she needed the solitary task, the simple rhythm of washing and drying to process all that had happened. In the barn, the horses nickered greetings. Star, the young foal, pranced to the stall door, eager for attention. Caleb was entranced, his fear forgotten in the presence of the gentle animals. "Can I touch her?" he asked breathlessly. "You sure can. Hold your hand flat, like this," Luke demonstrated, and soon Caleb was giggling as Star's velvet nose tickled his palm. Hannah stood back initially, maintaining her protective vigilance. But when Luke offered her a brush to groom the old mare, Buttercup, she accepted it carefully. "I used to ride," she said quietly as she worked. Before things got bad, Papa sold my pony, said girls didn't need such freedoms." "Well, I reckon girls need freedom as much as anyone," Luke replied. "Maybe more. You want to ride Buttercup later? She's gentle as they come." Hope flickered in Hannah's eyes. "Really? Really, your mama permitting? Of course." Even little Rosie participated, seated safely on a hay bale, solemnly feeding carrots to the barn cat who'd appeared as if by magic when children arrived. When they returned to the house, they found Eliza at the window, watching the road. Old habits died hard. "Mama, Mr. Luke says I can ride Buttercup." Hannah's excitement broke through her usual reserve. "And Star licked my hand," Caleb added. "Her tongue is really rough." Eliza's smile was like sun breaking through clouds. "That sounds wonderful." She met Luke's eyes over the children's heads. "Thank you." As the day progressed, a routine began to establish itself. Luke showed Caleb how to collect eggs without startling the hens. Hannah helped prepare lunch, showing surprising skill with a knife. Rosie helped by singing to everyone, her sweet voice filling the kitchen. But as afternoon shadows lengthened, Eliza grew restless again. Luke found her on the porch, his rifle across her lap, scanning the horizon. "They're not coming," he said gently. "It's over." "Is it?" She didn't look at him. "Wade has associates, business partners who profited from his trade. What happens when they realize I'm the one who brought him down?" Luke settled beside her, mindful of his bandaged ribs. "Then they'll learn what Morrison learned, that you're under protection now. Federal protection, local protection, and—" He paused, choosing his words. "My protection. For as long as you need it." She finally turned to him. "That's what I don't understand. Why? You could have turned us away that first night, even after you took us in. You could have handed us over when Morrison came calling. Instead, you bled for us, nearly died for us. Why?" Luke was quiet for a long moment, watching Caleb chase chickens in the yard while Hannah tried to restore order. You asked me once if I was lonely out here. Truth is, didn't realize how much until you all showed up. This house was built for a family, but I'd convinced myself I was fine alone, safe that way. And now? Now I've remembered what it's like to have something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. He met her gaze. I'm not asking for anything. Eliza, you've been controlled by men your whole life, your father, Morrison. Last thing you need is another man making claims, but this place is yours for as long as you want it. No conditions, no expectations. Tears tracked down her cheeks. I don't know how to live without conditions, without fear. Then you'll learn. All of you will. Day by day, season by season. Luke stood, offering his hand. Starting with letting that rifle rest. Hannah's got Caleb well in hand, and Rosie's safe with the chickens. Come inside. Let me teach you something. Curious despite herself, Eliza followed him to the kitchen. Luke pulled out flour, lard, and his mother's old recipe box. Pie crust, he announced. Apple pie, specifically. The children mentioned they'd never had homemade pie. Wade's cook made elaborate French pastries, Eliza said, but never simple pie. Nothing simple about good pie. Takes patience, gentle hands, and he smiled. A willingness to make a mess. Think you can manage? For the next hour. They worked side by side, Luke teaching her the techniques his mother had shown him. How to cut the lard just so. How to add water drop by drop. How to roll the crust without overworking it. Eliza's first attempt tore, but her second was better. The children drifted in, drawn by the warmth and sweet scents. Soon all 5 of them were involved, Caleb peeling apples with intense concentration, Hannah mixing cinnamon and sugar, even Rosie helping by eating apple slices. It smells like heaven, Hannah said as the pies went into the oven. Tastes better, Luke promised. We'll have them after supper. Supper was a lively affair, the children chattering about their day's adventures. Caleb had grand plans for helping with the spring calving. Hannah wondered aloud if she might attend the school in town come autumn. Rosie mainly focused on getting as much food on her face as in her mouth. When Luke brought out the pies, golden and steaming, a reverent hush fell. Have we made these? Caleb asked in wonder. We certainly did, Eliza confirmed, her pride evident. They ate in companionable silence, save for appreciative hums and Rosie's declaration that this was the best pie in the whole world ever. As the children prepared for bed, Luke and Eliza found themselves on the porch again. But this time the mood was different, peaceful rather than vigilant. The rifle remained inside. I have to go to Denver next week, Eliza said, and to testify. I know, Marshal Jennings will keep you safe. And the children? We'll be here when you get back. We'll manage fine. I'll teach Caleb to milk the cow. Let Hannah practice her riding. Rosie can reorganize my entire kitchen if she's so inclined. Eliza laughed softly. She probably will. The laugh faded. What if they don't convict? What if Wade finds a way? He won't. You've got documents, federal witnesses, and the Attorney General himself involved. Morrison's empire is crumbling. By the time you're done testifying, he'll be lucky to avoid the noose. I don't want him hanged, Eliza said quietly. Just stopped, unable to hurt anyone else. Prison will do that. Hard labor for the rest of his days, thinking about what he's lost. Luke paused. What about after? When the trial's done? I don't know. I've been running so long, I don't know how to stop, how to just be. Well, Luke said carefully, you could be here, you and the children. This ranch needs more than one person to run it proper. Could teach Caleb and Hannah the business, give them skills for their future. Good school in town for their education, clean air, honest work, and he gestured to the vast landscape. Room to breathe. Luke Tanner, are you offering me a job? Offering a partnership, maybe. Equal stakes in building something good here, something healing. He turned to face her fully. I know it's too soon to talk about other things. You need time to remember who you are without fear. But I want you to know you'll always have a home here, all of you. Whether as partners, friends, or whatever you choose, when you're ready to choose. Eliza was quiet for so long Luke feared he'd overstepped. Then she reached out, taking his hand. I don't know what I can offer in return. I'm broken in ways that might never fully mend. We're all broken somehow, but broken things can be useful too. Let light through in unexpected ways. He squeezed her hand gently. No rush, no pressure, just possibility. From inside came Rosie's voice, demanding one more story. Hannah's patient tones followed, beginning what sounded like a tale about brave knights and rescued princesses. She's got it backwards, Eliza murmured. In our story, the princess rescued herself. The knight just offered her a safe place to rest. Maybe that's the better version, Luke suggested, truer anyway. They sat together as full dark settled, hands linked, listening to the children's voices. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, preparing for the trial, fixing the shot-out windows, explaining to curious neighbors. But tonight, there was peace. Luke, Eliza said softly, I thank you for keeping your promise. He looked at her questioningly. That first night, you promised I'd never be cold again. She gestured to the warm house, the sleeping children, the future spreading before them. You kept it. Always will, he said simply and meant it. The stars emerged one by one, brilliant in the clear Wyoming sky. Inside, the children had settled into sleep, safe and warm. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on walls that had seen violence but now sheltered hope. It wasn't an ending. Too much lay ahead for that. But it was a beginning. A promise of seasons turning, wounds healing, love growing slowly and surely as spring grass after a hard winter. On a small ranch in Wyoming, a family was forming, not by blood or law, but by choice and chance and courage. And in that choosing, both Luke and Eliza found what they'd been seeking without knowing it, not just safety or companionship, but home. The night wind sang across the plains, and for the first time in memory, its song didn't sound lonely at all.